Welcome everybody to another AIJA Women Network webinar. I'm delighted to welcome you all here and to welcome our wonderful moderators and panelists. Our moderators today are Jennifer Maxwell, a senior partner at Blake Castles, a Canadian law firm in London, and Pia Padfield, a supervising associate at Simmons & Simmons, also in London. Jen is the brainchild of the AIJA Women Network, and we cannot thank her enough for all that she has done to bring this network to AIJA and all the wonderful initiatives that have come through it, of which this is one. So without further ado, I'm going to hand over to Jen and Pia as the moderators of this session to introduce our guest speakers. Over to you. Thank you.
Thank you very much for that kind introduction, Paula. We've been really excited by the creation of the AIJA Women's Network, and this is our third event now, and we seem to keep growing and growing. So thank you to the panelists for joining, and thank you to the attendees for taking the time out of their busy days. So without further ado, I want to introduce you to some of our panelists. First, I'd like to introduce you to our participants from the United States, Bobby Liebenberg and Stephanie Scharf. Bobby is a partner in Fine, Kaplan & Black in Philadelphia, where she concentrates her practice in complex commercial litigation. Stephanie is the founding partner of Scharf, Banks & Marmer, a women-owned law firm based in Chicago, which represents a broad array of international, national, and regional clients. But in addition to achieving excellence in their practices, Bobby and Stephanie have long been advocates and champions for diversity within the legal profession, both individually and as a team. I really don't have time to go through all of their achievements, so let me just give you a few of them. Each of Bobby and Stephanie have acted as chair of the American Bar Association Commission on Women in the Profession. Bobby served as chair of Direct Women, which is an organization dedicated to getting women lawyers on corporate boards. Stephanie has served as president of the National Association of Women Lawyers, and Bobby and Stephanie currently serve as co-chairs of the American Bar Association's Presidential Initiative on Achieving Long-Term Careers for Women in the Law. And it doesn't just stop there. They're also principals of the Red Bee Group, which is a women-owned firm that focuses on data-driven solutions and strategies to address diversity as well as corporate governance. So together and separately, they have conducted many US-wide studies on women's careers, including talking about everyday roles of women in law, the reasons why women choose to stay or leave the profession. And most recently, they've done a national survey looking at how women are doing as a result of the pandemic and addressing some of the issues going forward in our hopefully post-pandemic world. Pia, over to you to introduce our other panelists.
Thanks, Jen. So we're also really excited to have Melissa Pang, who's joining us from Hong Kong. Melissa is a partner in her own law firm. She's also the president-elect of Law Asia and council member of the Commonwealth Lawyers Association. And in 2013, Melissa was elected the first female president of the Law Society of Hong Kong, when she was then re-elected in 2019 and 2020. Melissa currently serves as chairperson of the Standing Committee on Policy and Resources and the Pro Bono and Community Work Recognition Committee. She was also the founding chair of the International Legal Affairs Committee and the Pro Bono Committee. And Melissa's also qualified, as well as being qualified in Hong Kong, she's also qualified as a solicitor in Australia and England and Wales. So we're very excited to have you here, Melissa. And then moving to Paula. Paula McMullen is a former lawyer who provides coaching and mentoring to lawyers at all levels, helping them to build their confidence and personal brand and find fulfillment in their career. Paula has more than 20 years experience in the global legal sector, helping firms to develop career frameworks and mentoring lawyers. And she now offers a tailored careers coaching program called the Lawyers Career Mastermind. So very happy to have you all here with us today. And now I think we'll start off with our discussion. So over to you, Jen.
Thanks very much, and thanks to the panelists. We thought we'd start our discussion by looking at the more macro environment. And while we have seen tremendous progress by women in our sector, as you can see from our panelists and our attendees, it's really important to acknowledge reality because that informs what each of us can do to progress our careers. And the unwelcome reality is that in the global legal sector, there continues to be inbuilt structural obstacles that affect women. Stephanie and Bobby, you've done significant research in this area. We are hoping that you could take some time to tell us what you've discovered and how you are working with legal leaders to address these issues.
Thank you, Jen, and thank you, AIJA, for this great and informative discussion. The retention and advancement of women lawyers is more critical than ever because clients all around the world are demanding that women serve as leads on deals and first chairs at trial, and that there's a pipeline of experienced women lawyers who can go into leadership positions. And those law firms that can stem the disproportionately high rate of attrition of women lawyers will have a competitive advantage. There was a great deal of anecdotal evidence that male leaders believe this attrition, this disproportionately high rate of attrition, was the result of women lawyers' lifestyle preference or an inability to really do the things that were necessary to promote their career. And the research conducted by Stephanie and me completely debunks this false narrative and demonstrates that what is impeding the progress of women lawyers is not a lack of an ambition, a dislike of the practice of law, or an ability to work hard. Rather, as Jen really astutely recognized, it's the culture and structure and implicit biases that are embedded in law firms. And in the groundbreaking study that Stephanie and I did, entitled Walking Out the Door, we looked at what were the reasons as to why experienced women lawyers, those who had been practicing 15 plus years, either left their law firms or stayed in their law firms. Our data showed that the real stampede out of legal professions in the US was actually at age 50, not at childbearing years. And our study was based on a survey by the ABA and ALM of male and female partners and managing partners of the top 500 US law firms. And we're just going to briefly describe some of the findings that I think are really striking and distressing. So 63% of the women respondents reported that they were perceived by their law firms not to be as committed to the firm compared to just 2% of men. And this perception about a lack of commitment increases with the number of children that women lawyers have. And it also results in less opportunities to work on significant matters and more negative evaluations. We also found that women lawyers experience differences in their everyday work experience with respect to advancement and compensation. And all of these differences, I want to emphasize, are a result of their gender. So 67% of women believe they were denied access to business development opportunities compared to just 10% of men. 54% of women believe they had been denied a salary increase or a bonus compared to 4% of men. 53% of women reported that they were overlooked for advancement as compared to just 7% of men, again, on account of gender. Almost half of the women reported that they missed out on a desirable assignment or lacked access to sponsors, which clearly relates to their ability to be compensated fairly. Equally distressing was that 54% of women felt treated as token representatives for diversity compared to 1% of men. And this was particularly impacted women attorneys of color, and especially when they were taken on client pitches and whether or not they would get origination credit. So all of these everyday differences and their work experiences, or as Stephanie and I characterize them as death by 1,000 cuts, resulted in why women were voting with their feet and leaving their law firms. And just for 2 minutes, I want to just emphasize that the data supports this difference in compensation, which shows a long-standing pay disparity between male and female lawyers, which increases with seniority. The ABA in 2019 found that on average, male equity partners earn about 27% more than female equity partners. A major Lindsay and Africa study found when you looked at all partners, male partners earned about 53% more than female partners, and that many of the reasons for this disparity in compensation results from the fact, for example, that male clients on average only refer to women lawyers about 18% of the time. Men and women go on client pitches at or about the same rate, but women receive significantly less origination credit. When women are in law firms, most of their business is as a result of their own business development, as opposed to internal firm referrals. And most men are not genius business development leaders. They actually have inherited business, which makes them rainmakers. And women, unfortunately, are generally not in line for succession. And now Stephanie will talk a little bit about why women left.
Thank you, Bobby. And I'm also very delighted to be here speaking with you today. What Bobby has described illustrates that there are structural obstacles really in terms of policies, and perhaps even more importantly these days, practices that impede the career trajectories of women lawyers. And many people are really not aware. Many lawyers in firms at all levels, even women lawyers, are not aware of how policies and practices actually impact women's careers. In the United States, there's been a fairly recent but strong focus on unconscious bias and how unconscious bias impedes women's careers. And Bobby talked about some of the findings we did on how biases play out in the legal profession in everyday work life. There's another set of findings that we also like to see firms versus even other senior lawyers in firms. So in our Walking Out the Door survey, we asked managing partners and senior and male partners and women partners, how is the firm doing in terms of advancing women in the law? And what we found was really striking differences in perspective. So when you ask firm leaders, is the firm an active advocate of gender diversity? Is gender diversity a widely acknowledged priority? Is the firm successful in promoting women leaders and in promoting women to equity partner and in retaining experienced women? The overwhelming, anywhere between 75% and 90% of leaders say, yes, our firm is good at doing that. But when you speak to the senior women in the firm, they don't have such a rosy view how well the firm is doing. And when we first show, in fact, it's a very significantly different and worse view of how firms are doing in advancing women. And when we first showed that information to law firm leaders, and because we did this in a series of seminars, it was in person at that time around the country, people were really struck by it. And it makes the point that if you are going to change, you have to really understand the experiences at people at all levels and not simply the people who sit on the executive committee of a firm. Now, in our walking out the door is the number one reason that women leave, especially children. And Bobby and I just completed a national survey of over 4,200 lawyers all across the United States. And the issue of caretaking has really gone over the top during the pandemic, when women, and in particular women with children, have been overwhelmed with all they have to do. And women with children experienced greater disruption in work than men. They get their work disrupted by family and household obligations multiple times during the day. They feel it's hard to keep home and work life separate, and they're overwhelmed with the stress about work and making sure that children are taken care of and are getting schooled, and that the day never seems to end. And these are situations that have been exacerbated by the pandemic, but it is a reality that women have more responsibility for taking care of children than men, even though most firms really don't provide support for that. And even during the pandemic, the workload in the United States, at least, did not abate. It stayed pretty much at the same level, whether you were in a law firm or a corporation. So one of the things we wanted to touch briefly on as well is what are we doing about this? Bobby and I do a lot of speaking about our research findings, often to bar associations like this. But lately, we've also been asked by private firms to speak privately in firm sessions and to work with firms to help them overcome the obstacles that they see in their approaches to women at work, and put the firm on a solid basis for retaining and advancing women lawyers and focusing on that. And of course, there are very important business reasons why. In the United States, as an example, close to 50% of all law school graduates are women and have been for a number of years. And I think it's become apparent to everyone that this percentage and this number of women is not going to go away. It's going to continue. And if firms want to recruit and retain talent, they can't block off a large segment of law school classes. They can't block off a large segment of people, women who've been practicing law for a number of years, because if they do, they're going to end up with a very limited set of talent to offer to clients, talent to grow the firm, talent to keep the firm innovative. And so one of the things that we also talk to employers about is, what's your long-term planning? What do you think you're going to look like 5 years from now, 7 years from now? Very few firms think 10 years out. But if you look at the array of talent in the profession, if you are a firm that is not truly advancing women into the most senior roles, you are going to look like the odd firm out in 5 years, because all sorts of other firms are going to get it and move ahead of you. So we think demography is destiny when it comes to diversity in the profession. And that's one of the issues that sometimes is very eye-opening for law firm leaders.
Thanks very much for that. That was super interesting. And Melissa, we'd really like to understand if you're seeing any similar issues to what Bobby and Stephanie have described in AIJA, and get your perspective as a prominent leader of the legal sector about the future of women in law.
Oh, thank you, Pierre. I think Stephanie and Bobby really done a great survey, and their finding is very enlightening and useful, like for us. I think I can't speak for the whole Asia because the whole Asia is like very diverse and different jurisdiction. But maybe I can speak and share the experience of in Hong Kong. Of course, like Hong Kong actually is the Asian legal hub. We do have like in terms of solicitor, we have 12,000 solicitors, and for law firm we have like nearly 1,000 law firms, and actually we have many international law firms as well as the local law firm. So and all we have like 1,500 foreign lawyers. So from 32 different jurisdictions. It's a very interesting scenario in Hong Kong. We have like Hong Kong lawyers and also foreign lawyers. It's a very good mix because we would say our clientele is, it ranges from like local clients to multinational clients in Hong Kong. So I can see in Hong Kong, law firm actually places a lot of emphasis on like talent retention because that's very important. The market is extremely competitive and talent is the key to keep the client, to satisfy client's demand. And also at the moment, when we look at the situation of like women lawyers in law, why don't I just share with you some basic statistics. When you look at it, like in university, I think at the moment the proportion is around 65% are female, and only 35% are male. So you can see there are like more women in university level. And when you get to like trainee solicitor, at the moment in Hong Kong, you still have to undertake like 2 years of traineeship. So the percentage is 63%. When you go to like assistant solicitor, the percentage is 60% for women. So when you get up to partnership, the figure drops to 31%. So it is a concern, and it rings a bell. Why there's so many women? When you get to partnership level, they're not there to stay. Of course, there are many reasons because we haven't really done a very scientific study on that. But maybe one of the reasons people will be like, is it because of the flexible working arrangement? Or on the other hand, of course, there are like people will be addressing the issue of like unconscious bias, whether like there'll be like a glass ceiling in their law firm, or whether the law firm policy and practice has been affecting their retention of women. I think like also, we have done a survey back in 2019. Like we asked all our members, but of course we have 12,000 members. I think the return rate is around like maybe have over 1,500 lawyers answering the survey. And we are asking like how accommodating law firms is enable their staff to cope with personal needs. And maybe I can share some result. Because we are asking our respondent whether they are the primary caretaker. And it comes back like out of the male respondent, 64% indicated they were not the primary caretaker. So that means like over 36%, around that figure, 1/3, say they would be the primary caretaker. But when you look at the response by the female respondent, 72%, more than 2/3, said they are the primary caretaker. So because Hong Kong is still mainly a Chinese society, so in a way there'll be some sort of like idea that the woman will be also take care of more housework, where the man will be like less focused on that. But on the other hand, the interesting part is like people do expect the woman to work as well. So the woman end up with 2 jobs, majority of the housework and also a full-time job. This is actually quite interesting and quite unique in Hong Kong. But when we ask whether they have difficulty to take time off to take care of their dependent, only 4% of the respondents said they find it difficult to take care of their dependents. I think that's a special, unique feature in Hong Kong, because in Hong Kong, we do have domestic helpers. So in that aspect, that's quite a bit of how you can get externally to assist with your housework or take care of your dependents. And another figure, that's when we ask out of the female primary caretakers whether they find it difficult to find time to take care, the result is like 20%. 20% say, oh, that's a bit of a problem, a bit of difficulty for them to take time off work to look after their dependent. But when we ask the male, interestingly, the result come back to be 19%. So the figure is 19 and 20. So when we do the analysis, we realize that there's no data, not significant data, pointing to female finding it more difficult to find the time off to look after their family members. Another issue we are specific on our survey is about sexual harassment, because it is a very hot topic and a big issue in many jurisdictions. But in our survey, we asked respondents whether they have experienced any sexual harassment in the profession in the last 5 years. And overall, 3% answered that they had such an experience. But out of the female respondents, 5% say they have experienced sexual harassment. And out of the male respondents, 1% said they had. So this rings a bell as well. And we are putting in attention and focus on this. And we've been talking to like law firms around, because I think it's zero tolerance for sexual harassment for all. And also, like, of course, I'm very committed. I've been a Law Society president for the 2.5 years. And we've been like pushing and encourage a culture of gender diversity and inclusion. I think it's a topic that we have to keep pushing hard, because like, it's not a project that we can just put in effort and it's finished, because it's continuous evolving. And the problem and the research need to be more in depth. And at the moment, we are continuing with like to collect more data regarding this, and we intend to do it on a more regular basis, because with more survey, we can see the trend and also to analyze the data in a more scientific manner. And we've been developing a CPD course, we call it Continuous Professional Development course, to raise awareness for members. And also, we've been lobbying in various government committees. For example, for the last few years, the government has changed their policy for women on government advisory boards, as well as for other committees. There's a guideline of 35%. So for government appointment to advisory board, they need 35% to be women, at least 35%. I think it's a very good move. And also, you can see in listed company in Hong Kong, I think the trend is like they have to have a guideline because there'll be, we are observing underrepresentation on board as well. So we can see this issue of gender diversity and also like retention of talent. It's not just unique to the legal profession. It happens in all the profession and also in the business world. I think on a wider basis, when you look at the whole community, that we are sharing our experience and we're learning and sharing from each other. I think it's very important. I think I'll stop here for the time being. Thank you.
Thank you, Melissa. That was very insightful. And it seems like while there are some commonalities, there are different regional differences. But I think that we can all acknowledge that there are those structural barriers. But in the past few years, there has been an acknowledgement with new research, with firms coming out and talking about these issues more prominently, that we may be on a cusp of a change. And so that's why we thought that this session was really important. And we wanted to shift now towards, now that we've looked at the macro environment, we wanted to talk about what each of the attendees could be thinking about and what they could do to progress their career. And in the private practice context, that's often looking at partnership. So Paula often she regularly coaches lawyers on how to make that next step. And she's even established one of these career coaching sessions at a large global law firm. So we've brought her on board the panel to help us all have a think about, if we are thinking about partnership, what we should be doing. So Paula, maybe you can share with us your top 3 or 4 easily implementable tips that people can start doing as soon as they log off this Zoom call.
Okay, well, thank you very much for inviting me to be part of this discussion today. There are so many things that were coming into my head when I was listening to the previous panelists. And one of the things is how do we draw a connection between the data and what is actually happening on the ground? Because it doesn't matter, in my experience, what the data says if the individuals don't buy into it. So that was one of the things. I don't have a solution, by the way. I would love to have one, but I don't believe there's a magic bullet here. So my top 3, I'm not going to call them tips, but these are the arms, if you like, of the strategy that I recommend to everybody who comes to talk to me. And I coach predominantly women. I do coach men as well. And what is interesting is that there are plenty of men who also are not looking up at the current partnership model and thinking, oh, I want some of that. There are plenty of men who are saying, I don't see any role models. This is not really what I want. So when I'm working with lawyers, it's very much about the strategy of making their career work for them. And so the 3 elements that I really recommend that you give time to is considering the why, the what, and the how. So the why, first of all. If I tell you that the law can be tough, I'm not telling you anything you don't already know. And so it's really, really vital that you understand why you want to be doing this. Why do you want to go for progression? Why do you want to be a partner? Be clear on why that matters to you. Because if you can connect to the bigger reason why you want partnership and what is going to happen once you have partnership, all of the things that you'll be able to achieve, it's going to make it much, much easier to make it through the times when you're feeling frustrated, when you're not feeling heard, when you don't have a clear idea of where this is all going. If you can tap into your purpose, what is it that I'm doing this for? I guarantee that you will realize you have an inner strength to just keep going. And that means being clear that this is something that you want. It's not something which is being expected of you by, for example, your family or by the profession, because let's face it, when we go into the profession, generally, everybody's aiming for partnership. There really isn't a great deal on the sides. And I know there are plenty of law firms who are broadening out the different career paths, but at the end of the day, it's being an owner in the law firm, which is the big gold stamp. So make sure that that's what you really want, that it's not just because that's the expectation of the profession, or indeed what you see your peers doing. Understanding your big why, it connects with your emotions. So it may be that once I'm a partner, I will have the financial independence, which allows me to be the best parent I can be, or which once I'm a partner, I can choose the work I want to do. So I'm only going to choose to do the interesting, really analytical new law type work. you see where I'm going with this. So when you come off the call, you can start thinking about, why on earth am I doing this? What is it that's so important to me about becoming partner? And really key into what's going to motivate you going forwards. The next thing to consider is the what. What do I need to do? Or what do I think I need to do? And this is very often where lawyers get a bit stuck. They focus very much on the practical steps and on the tasks that they need to do. And it's difficult because when you're not a partner, the process can be very opaque. And I actually believe that it's opaque and unclear on purpose, because when somebody doesn't get made up, the partners don't really have to explain where that person fell short of the criteria if there aren't any clear criteria. But call me a cynic, but that's my view. So don't make any assumptions about what is required. I hear people saying, oh, I need to do business development. I need a following. And that may be the case, but it may not be. So it's very important that you talk to people who've already gone through that process. It's also very important to remember that past performance isn't an indicator of future performance, because the world is changing. So is what partners or what makes a great partner today, is that going to be the same in 5 years' time? Are you sure that by replicating what somebody has already done, you are still going to be a great partner for tomorrow? So also ask yourself, what's within my control? Because you can only do your best putting your case forwards. At the end of the day, the vote is down to the existing partners. So recognize what is within your control and what isn't, and focus on where you can have an impact. So that's the what. The bit which I think is absolutely critical is the how. How am I going to do this? And this is so much down to mindset and confidence. And when when women come to me and they're feeling stuck and frustrated in their career right now, I very often hear that they're blaming themselves, that they feel they're falling short, that they aren't good enough, or they're self-sabotaging. They don't like to speak up in meetings in case they get things wrong. So knowing how you're going to do this and building your strategy to develop your confidence, to have an empowered mindset, is absolutely vital. It's about getting out of your own way, because there are plenty of barriers without you putting barriers of your own in the way. And understanding that you are unique. So what value do you offer? What value do you bring? A lot of lawyers say to me, oh, I'm a great communicator. I'm brilliant with the clients. I've got fantastic problem solving skills. Well, I'm glad to hear you say that, because quite frankly, as a lawyer, you kind of need that stuff. So what does make the difference? It's the way that you put all of that together. It's the way you package yourself. It's about the value that you bring to your clients, to partners, to your peers, and to the wider community. That is what makes a difference. And this is what I'm talking about when I refer to personal brand. So understanding the results that you offer is a really crucial part of the how you're going to make it to partner. And it's about positioning yourself so that, a little bit like buying a car, you want to be preempting any objections to your candidacy, and you want people to think, heck yeah, we need her on board because of all the things that she can deliver. So that's my 3 sort of pillared strategies. So as I say, when you leave today, you can go away, think about your big why. You can find out what the steps are to partnership in your firm to the extent that that information is available, and talk to people who have already gone through that process. I do pass to partnership coaching at a top 10 firm in the city, and it's amazing how willing people are to talk through their journey, but with the caveat that you also need to be thinking about what a law firm's going to be needing in the next 3 to 5 years, whatever your runway to partnership is. And then finally, what are you, how much do you want this? And what is it that might get in the way of you going for partnership? What are the beliefs that might be holding you back? And what is the value that you have to offer? So there's quite a lot in all of that, obviously. But this is the thing, it does take work. It does take work to position yourself. And I know that you will all have a lot of this inside you. That's my core belief, that my clients come to me, they have the resources inside them. They're just not in touch with them right now. So believe in yourselves. And I can't wait to see where you all get to in, well, I was going to say 5 years' time, next year. Short-term goals.
That's great. Thank you so much, Paula. I think a lot of the points certainly resonated with me, and will do with also with our audience. So thank you so much. And I'm definitely going to take on that list of things as well after this call. So moving to Melissa, while partnership is often the goal, as we've discussed, it's not the only goal. And lawyers at any stage must also negotiate things like salary rises or roles on key files. Melissa, can you tell us what your best pieces of advice are to give to lawyers who are dealing with these issues?
Maybe just a few comments first. I think like that really, as Paula mentioned, you asked about why, what, and how. Actually, I'll add one. You have to ask yourself who you are, really. Because I'll say from my generation, because I've been in practice for like over 20 plus years. And now when I first became a lawyer, I think like most of my colleagues, they will say, fine, everyone is getting a law firm. That's a norm. So that's the normal track, you hop on there. And then everyone say, oh, we work towards from associate up to a senior associate up to partnership. That's really like the norm. But at the moment, like in Hong Kong, we realize, for all our members, like 1/3 of them are already in-house. And now when you talk to the younger generation, somehow they don't really have a strong aspiration to be a partner. But maybe some do, but at least they all leave their option open. So people are thinking much wider. They have many choices, so they can decide whether to go on this career path or others. They always keep their option open. But I think when you talk about like people, when they lawyers negotiate salary raises and also like role in key files, I think it's very important to first to ask yourself whether you assess yourself, your performance yourself. Because normally you do it like, okay, your boss will be assessing how good you are, but you have to be more objective and see, assess yourself, whether you are trying your best. And on the other hand, you have to demonstrate. You have to look back whether you have really demonstrated to your boss or whether you are really worthwhile for the salary raises. I think like a simple way to put it is like, we should have more communication, and also you try to step into the shoes of your partner. Because if you step into their shoes, you will ask yourself, if I were the partner, will I give that person a pay rise? I think it's a good way to assess it. And another thing is like, I would say people need to have more information, because in a way, when you talk about unconscious bias, it could be unconscious on yourself to have the bias on your personal assessment. I think why I make this comment is, I remember that is psychology analysis. Like there's a teamwork, 3 people working on the same job. And you ask each of them, what is the percentage you have contributed to that piece of work? And somehow the summation of the 3 person adding together. For example, we got A, B, and C asking, what's the percentage of contribution to this piece of work? They will say 40, 50, and 30%. Then you add up to be 120%. So And normally the observation is people will assess their contribution to be more than the actual contribution. And this is, I think if you go back to some psychology study, you can check. This is actually very true. Everyone subjectively think they have put in more effort than they have. So I think this is just a piece of advice. We must be more objective and to be less subjective in assessing your own contribution. So it would be great if you have like good friends or mentor who can give you an objective piece of advice. And also, it's very good to have better communication with your partner so that when you can just sit down and really negotiate about your pay rise, so people can be objective and you can understand where they come from. And I think it's kind of like a mediation. So it's best to have like build up the trust and confidence and get to a mutually happy result. Yep, I think I'll rest my comments here. Thank you.
Thanks so much. It does sound that one of the themes going through this whole discussion is how communication is important in order to understand your position in whichever situation you're in. And we're all facing a really unusual situation now with the pandemic, and hopefully a lot of us are we've moved from working in a office environment to working from home, and now some are shifting back towards the office and more are going to be doing that. And Stephanie and Bobby had mentioned earlier that they've done some studies on the impact of the pandemic on women. And so we thought it would be useful to take a few minutes before our second to last question to talk about some the results of their findings, and most importantly, some tips for all of us when we're making this shift back to the office.
Thanks, Jen. I'm going to lay out some of the data, and Stephanie will talk about best practices. But I would like the audience, all of the research that Stephanie and I have talked about is free to download from the ABA on Commission website. And it also includes some research, going to Paula's point, about a grit and growth mindset, which is based on the psychology of Dr. Angela Duckworth and Dr. Carol Dweck, which talks about the tips and steps you can take to develop that passion piece and how you can change your mindset to overcome challenges. It also includes a booklet on how to negotiate compensation and how to really set forth your value proposition and the use of sponsors to help advocate for you on leadership and compensation roles. But as Stephanie mentioned, with respect to the pandemic, and we have found that it has definitely disproportionately impacted women who have had to shoulder the responsibility for childcare, for in-person, for homeschooling because of the lack of in-person schooling, and that it has resulted in an increase in stress, particularly because, as Stephanie mentioned, the requirement of billable hours was not reduced or incorporation work hour requirements. And so our data demonstrated that women, and especially women with young children, were more likely to think about leaving the profession or going part-time because they feel that they are overlooked on assignments in this virtual world and they're not getting the best of assignments, and that their pathway to advancement may be harmed because of how they're viewed, their performance is viewed during the pandemic. In addition, we also wanted to know how law firms and corporate law departments, what were they doing with respect to their diversity, equity, and inclusion programs? Because we know from the last recession that once again, women and lawyers of color were disproportionately impacted. And so we asked the question, were DEI strategies, one, did you have them? Were they put on hold or were they increased? And we found that there were 4 DEI strategies that corporate law departments and law firms shared in common: mentorship and sponsorship, implicit bias training, increasing the number of lawyers of color, and women in leadership position, and making sure that lawyers of color and women were having more opportunities to work on significant matters. We found that where corporations and law firms had DEI strategies, they were not put on hold, which was a very positive finding. Instead, they either remained the same or increased. We did find, though, that there was a much greater increase around implicit bias training, especially with respect to race and ethnicity, and corporate law departments were actually making a significant effort around implicit bias training, a little bit more than law firms. And that one last finding, which was very significant, was around how lawyers of color and women were experiencing stress on account of their gender and race and ethnicity during the pandemic. 66% of lawyers of color stated that they experienced stress often, almost all the time, or sometimes. So that was a very sobering statistic. 54% of women said they were experiencing stress as a result of their gender. It was also higher for women lawyers of color. So these statistics, again, are very sobering and could portend an exodus of diverse talent, especially lawyers of color and women. We urge law firms and legal organizations to remain laser focused on their DEI strategy.
Thank you, Bobby. I am going to talk about some things that people can do to help their careers based on our survey, but I want to say I'm doing it with some ambivalence, because I firmly believe, as many have mentioned, that careers are not just about what you can do, but about what your employer is doing, what culture you're working in, what are the policies and practices that help advance you forward. So I'd like to begin by a best practice that we feel is very important for law firms to undertake, and really any organization that employs lawyers. And that is leaders who help shape the culture of their organizations. As we emerge from the pandemic, and hopefully we are emerging, although the data sometimes make it difficult to say that, but as we emerge, this is a wonderful time for leaders of any organization, including law firms, to think about what kind of culture do we want to have? What do we really value? What do we want to look like 2 and 3 and 5 years from now? And how will we get there? And who's going to be accountable for making sure we are who we say we want to be? And in a few weeks, when our report comes out, you'll see that there's a lot more about best practices for law firms and corporate law departments and organizations. But I didn't want to let that point go away, because I believe the onus is on employers to make sure they have the kind of culture and setting in which everyone they hire can thrive. In terms of yourself, we have a number of best practices also, but I would say one very important one is don't be too hard on yourself. Set realistic expectations for what you can do. I didn't know this when I first started to practice law, but legal careers take place over a long period of time, 30 and 40 years. You have a lot of time to go a lot of places, and careers are not a straight line like you used to think when you were in law school. They're more like a labyrinth or a jigsawed path, and you don't know where you'll end up. And I think that you have to be patient and kind to yourself, that if you feel like you're doing good work, you will get there. And you may not know where there is, but you will get there. And the other thing I would say, because Bobby and I could talk about this for a long time, but I'll make one other point. Not all firms tell you this, but how you do with clients and how you develop business is very important to your career. So even during the pandemic, and certainly as we emerge, but even now, stay visible with your clients. You can call them up just to say, how are you doing? You don't have to call them up to ask them for more business. How are you doing? I was thinking about you. I thought I would check in. Because really, at the end of the day, it's personal relationships that really, not how brilliant you are, not, whether you were #1 in your law class or where you went to law school. How are your relationships holding up over a long period of time? That, I think, is very important for each individual to cultivate. So I'll stop here because I know we're probably running close to the border of time.
Thank you so much, Stephanie and Bobby. And I love the image of the labyrinth. That's exactly how I picture my career so far, which is only sort of 10 years in. So thank you so much. I think that's really helpful. So just to conclude this session, we're just going to hopefully go around and ask all of you to just share one challenge only that you faced in where you are in your career, and also how you managed to overcome it. And perhaps we could start with you, Paula, because you've had a really interesting career, I think, because you're a former lawyer who are now coaching and teaching lawyers and having influence over law firms and their internal structures. So perhaps you could start off.
Yes, it's very interesting that Roberta mentioned Carol Dweck and fixed mindset and growth mindset, because I live my life through my growth mindset, which is that I've never failed at anything. Because as soon as it looks as if it's not kind of going to work out, I just change the goalposts. I never let anything get me to a point where I think I've failed. Because to me, I haven't got time for failure. It's just a waste of my energy. It's a drain on my energy. So when I was an associate and I was 4 or 5 years PQE, and my partner was sending a newly qualified male associate to tell me what to do, and was taking the lead on calls and things, I just marched into his office and said, I'm leaving. I'm not going to be treated like that. And he was a bit shocked, but I did have a game plan. So even when I ran my business before, if it didn't look as if I was going to make my financial goals, then I would change lanes. I would find a different way of generating business, or I would definitely be keeping my network, my existing network warm and growing. So I would just say, I'm not suggesting for a moment that you just give up, absolutely not, but it is very much about recognizing when you're flogging a dead horse and finding another way. There is always another way.
Thank you. Melissa, thanks. Melissa, do you want to give us your one challenge and how you overcame it?
I'll add challenge. I'll just say challenge. Maybe there are like decision you have to take. Like our sisters say, whether I should take up the presidency of Law Society. Okay, to me, like in a way, like I realize many lawyers, they're supposed, when they do deal with cases, they are very objective, they are very analytical. But sometimes when it gets to personal, it's a personal decision to do or not to do. You get more emotional, and sometimes you get more stressful. So how initially I was sort of thinking to do or not to do, and I got like losing a few nights sleep, and I don't like that idea. I think the way my advice is, if someone is facing similar situation, you should calm down. I try to calm down and have a more analytical analysis of the situation, and the main thing is to have friends to talk about, to support you, because you have other women's lawyers who can share their experience, and they can give you like really power and energy. It makes you like with more energy, you can sort of address the issue more objectively. And also, I think it's very good if you can get a mentor, because if other women, they can lead by example, and then sometimes you look up and say, if she can do it, maybe I can. So I think I really appreciate this platform for us to share our experience. Thank you.
Thank you. Stephanie, do you want to give us one?
Yes, thank you. So it is true that I founded a women-owned law firm, but for 25 years before that, I was a partner in two very large firms. I was an associate and a partner in what what is today a mega firm, global firm. And when I first joined as an associate, I kind of drank the Kool-Aid in the sense of the firm said, we're a meritocracy. If you can do the work, you will succeed. And I said, that sounds good to me. I know I can do the work. And then over time, over the next few years, I realized, well, there were some really good lawyers who didn't get promoted to partner. And why is that? And I didn't figure it out, but fortunately, I have a very good friend, my husband, who said to me, you've got to get not a mentor, a sponsor. You've got to get someone who's going to pound the table for you. So it took me another year out of fear to ask one of the most powerful men in the firm if I could work on his matters. And he said, no, I don't have anything. So I went back and my husband pushed me again. No, ask again. So 2 months later, I asked again and he had something. And I worked for him. And guess what? When it came time to make partner, he pounded the table. And plenty of other people in my class didn't have someone like that. So my advice would be brave, ask for, find how somehow get a sponsor to advance. And everybody else is all the guys doing it. So don't be afraid to do it yourself.
Thank you, Stephanie. And last but not least, Bobby.
Well, I think you're going to hear a lot of similar themes in terms of advice. So I was also a partner at a very large law firm, and I was always very entrepreneurial. From a very early time, I started building business, because if you want to leave work and go to your child's Halloween parade or do anything, if you have a book of business, no one is going to stop you. And so I came to the conclusion that I was only going to go so far in my law firm. And I took a risk and also created the first women-owned law firm in Philadelphia that concentrated on complex commercial litigation, and was able, again, to take my clients with me. So a couple of thoughts. One, I didn't burn bridges. In fact, I got a bonus after I had even left. Always leave if you can on good terms and maintain those networks. Don't be afraid to take risks. I always had the feeling that, you know, if this didn't work out, I'd be able to, sort of like Paula, change the goalpost, land on my feet, and do something else. I was also a part of a Rainmaker study, which demonstrated that there are no gender differences between male and female rainmakers. What differentiates them is that when rainmakers hear the word no, they actually don't hear that word. They only hear the word not now. And they try to figure out what are the steps I need to take to get to yes? Do I go back to that partner and explain to him, I want to make partner? How do I do that? Do I try to establish a sponsor who will help vouch for me when I'm not in the room? What are all the ways I need to get to yes? And always have confidence in yourself.
That's it. Thank you very much to all of our panelists. We hope that all of the attendees have enjoyed the wide range of topics that we've covered, both from starting from the individual up into firm-wide and even discussions of society. But I'm now going to pass over to Francois Barret, who is going to conclude our session.
Thank you so much, everyone. It was absolutely tremendous. Thank you, Stephanie, Roberta, Melissa, Pia, Paula, and Jennifer for your really enlightening experience. I really learned many things, and the what, why, how is very interesting. I will discuss about it very often. I think there is one thing that is very interesting that I thought is that maybe the unconscious bias of people choosing you is something we really need to be aware of. Is that what I realized here is sometimes the people in charge of deciding who will be next partners don't even realize that they are unconsciously biased in their approach, and it is something that dawned on me. And I think the last really important thing I've learned, I am always very often considered as a mentor, but not necessarily as a sponsor. And the difference is very subtle, but I do agree that sometimes it is up to us also to reflect and be able to say, this won't happen under my term. And this is very interesting, I think. And I can't thank you enough for taking the time to make us aware of all this. So really, from the bottom of my heart, thank you very much. And it is really great. And I'm really proud that AIJA is able to have such wonderful speakers discussing such interesting topics. Thank you so much.
Thank you, everyone. Sorry, go ahead, Paula.
Yeah, I just wanted to flag the survey in the link. If we could ask all participants just to complete it before you log off, that would be very much appreciated. Thank you. Over to you, Jen.
I was going to say the same thing. So thank you very much to everyone, and we'll look forward to seeing you at our next event.
Thank you.
Bye.